Well, good morning. So, the last few weeks I've been talking about the space between and the importance of keeping any negativity out of it. And then I went on to say that the problem is that often it's unconscious. So, how do you make the unconscious conscious? And I suggested that couples, if that's an issue, if negativity is an issue, to agree beforehand on a code word or action that lets the other person know, hey, that didn't work, and then to fix it, to use the safe conversation process to fix it. So what I'm going to talk about here, I think, is a great example of how the negativity can show up unconsciously in a relationship. Now, this took place in the office a few months ago, but the same thing can happen at home. And we dealt with it in the office. The key is to have the tools to deal with it constructively at home. So the woman brought up an issue. It was not about her husband. It was just an issue, but a lot of energy around it. And he mirrored her back really well, no problem. But when it came his turn to talk, he said something like, because he knows how competent she is, he said something like, hey, don't worry about it. It's nothing. You can handle it. And her whole demeanor shifted. I saw it. Her whole body language just, and I said, what happened? And she said, I felt dismissed. Then, because I know that the past often affects the present, I asked her, I said, well, did you ever feel dismissed as a kid? All the time. You know, she was third or fourth in a large family, and from her subjective perception as a child, she felt that what she had to say wasn't important, wasn't heard, she wasn't listened to. In other words, she felt dismissed. So, in the past, and it had happened in the past, she would shut down. He wondered, what just happened? And they wouldn't talk for 2 or 3 days. All right? So, like I said, this happened in the office, but it's the kind of interaction that can happen in the space between at home. And if it stays unconscious, which it had in their case for 15 years, it could cause problems. Now, I flagged it in the office, but at home, that would be a great instance of where if they had agreed on something beforehand, she could flag, a word, a code word, an action, something that, hey, that didn't work, and then they would have to talk about it, which we did in the office. They used a safe conversation process. They put their heads together, and they came up with some ideas that would prevent this from happening in the future. All right? So think about it. It was not his intention at all to dismiss her. That was, he thought he was supporting her. But it came across to her as negative because of her childhood. Remember, the past does affect the present. That's the magic of the Imago system, I think, is that don't be surprised if something from your past, some negative stuff, shows up in the relationship, and now you have to talk about it. And that's the safe conversation process. All right? So once he understood where that was coming from, it made sense. He could validate that. And she, on her turn, could validate that it was not his intention to dismiss her. And like I said, then they put their heads together and came up with some ideas that would prevent this from happening in the future. So for me, it was a great example of how negativity can creep into a relationship unconsciously. All right? And at home, like I said, if that happened, she'd have to flag it. And then they say that didn't work. And the idea is that the two people agree on something that's not going to get their back up even more. And then talk about it. So here's a quick review of what we've been doing. And then next week is Valentine's Day. I'm going to share something different. And then after that, there's going to be one more piece to this space between puzzle. But in a conscious relationship, no negativity in the space between, no blame, shame, or criticism. But because it is often unconscious, to agree to a code word or action that you can flag it to each other without getting the other person's back up even more, and then use the safe conversation process to sort it out. All right? So next week is Valentine's Day, and my wife and I are gonna talk about, I'm gonna talk, but we've already done this. If you go to her website, Journey to Inner Wisdom, there's links to the podcast and the YouTube video. We talked about these 5 books, and they're just 5 books. There's tons of books out there, self-help books, but these are 5 that we have used and were important to us. I used in the office that could help in any intimate relationship. All right, so hopefully we'll see you next week. Have a great Valentine's Day, and remember, Valentine's Day is not just one day of the year, but you want to spread that out over the whole year. All right, have a great day. Cheers.